His name was Raymond. He was 81 years old. Severe chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and pulmonary fibrosis. His lungs were scarred and damaged beyond repair. He needed 5 liters of oxygen per minute, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to stay alive. Without it, his blood oxygen saturation dropped to dangerous levels. In July of 2026, his medical equipment supplier requested refill authorization for his oxygen supply. Medicare Advantage denied it 4 times. Raymond died 9 days later from respiratory failure. He suffocated because an insurance company decided his oxygen was no longer medically necessary. Raymond had been a coal miner for 38 years. He worked underground in West Virginia from the time he was 18 until he retired at 56. He knew the risks. Everyone who goes down in the mines knows what coal dust does to your lungs. But it was good money. It supported his family. It paid for his kids to go to college. By the time he retired, his lungs were already damaged. The cough started a few years later. Then the shortness of breath. Then the diagnosis. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, severe stage. Pulmonary fibrosis from years of coal dust exposure. Progressive. Terminal. No cure. Raymond was prescribed home oxygen in 2018. At first, he only needed it at night and during activity. 2 liters per minute. Within a year, he needed it all the time. 3 liters. Then 4. By 2024, he was on 5 liters continuously. He had a large oxygen concentrator in his living room that pulled oxygen from the air and delivered it through tubing to a nasal cannula. He had a portable oxygen tank for when he needed to leave the house, though he rarely did anymore. Walking from his chair to the bathroom left him breathless even with oxygen. Without it, he couldn't walk at all. His pulmonologist monitored him closely. Every 3 months, Raymond came in for pulmonary function tests and oxygen saturation checks. The tests showed his lung capacity was about 28% of normal. His oxygen saturation without supplemental oxygen was in the mid-70s. Normal is 95 to 100%. Anything below 90 is considered hypoxemia. Below 80 is severe. Below 70 is life-threatening. Raymond's body couldn't survive without continuous oxygen supplementation. This was documented at every appointment. His pulmonologist's notes stated clearly that Raymond was oxygen dependent and would die without it. July of 2026. Raymond's oxygen supplier contacted his Medicare Advantage plan to request authorization for continued oxygen supplies. This included replacement concentrator filters, portable oxygen tanks, and tubing. It was a routine request. Raymond had been approved for home oxygen continuously since 2018. The supplier submitted the request with Raymond's current pulmonary function tests, oxygen saturation measurements, and a letter from his pulmonologist stating medical necessity. The first denial came back in 5 days. The reason given was, patient must try pulmonary rehabilitation first. Raymond's daughter called the insurance company. She explained her father had end-stage lung disease. He could barely walk across a room. How was he supposed to do pulmonary rehabilitation? The representative said the policy required patients to complete pulmonary rehab before long-term oxygen therapy could be approved. Raymond's pulmonologist wrote a letter explaining that pulmonary rehab is beneficial for some COPD patients, but Raymond's disease was too advanced. He was not a candidate for rehab. He was a candidate for hospice. The appeal was submitted. Second denial. Reduce oxygen flow to 3 liters per minute and re-evaluate in 90 days. Raymond's pulmonologist called the insurance company directly. He explained that oxygen dosing is not arbitrary. It's based on measured oxygen saturation levels. Raymond required 5 liters to maintain adequate saturation. Reducing to 3 liters would put him in severe hypoxemia. The medical reviewer said the guidelines recommended starting at lower flow rates. The pulmonologist said those guidelines are for initiating oxygen therapy, not for patients already on established doses. Raymond had been on 5 liters for 2 years. Reducing it now would be dangerous. He submitted another appeal with detailed oxygen saturation data. Third, denial. Oxygen saturation acceptable at rest without supplemental oxygen. This was factually incorrect. Raymond's most recent test showed his saturation was 78% at rest without oxygen. The pulmonologist had the documented proof. He submitted it again with the appeal, highlighting the actual numbers. He stated clearly that the insurance company's claim was false and not supported by any medical documentation in the record. Fourth and final denial. Ongoing oxygen therapy no longer medically necessary. Discontinue use. Raymond's oxygen supplier received the denial on a Friday afternoon. They called Raymond's daughter to let her know. She asked what that meant. They explained that without authorization, they couldn't deliver any more oxygen supplies. Raymond's main concentrator was still working, but his portable tanks were nearly empty. The concentrator filters were overdue for replacement. Without clean filters, the concentrator would eventually fail. She asked how long the concentrator would last. They said maybe a week, maybe 2. It depended on the filters. She asked what happens when it stops working. They were quiet for a moment. Then they said she should call hospice. Raymond didn't understand what was happening. He knew his oxygen tanks were empty. He asked his daughter when the new ones would arrive. She didn't know how to tell him. She said they were working on it. She called the pulmonologist's office. They said they would file another appeal, but the insurance company had issued a final denial. There was no further appeals process available. She asked what her father was supposed to do. The nurse said quietly that she should prepare for the worst. Day 1, Raymond was still able to speak in short sentences. He stayed in his recliner with the concentrator running. Day 3, the concentrator started making strange noises. The filters were clogged. The oxygen output was decreasing. Raymond couldn't get up without his oxygen saturation dropping into the 60s. He stayed in the chair. Day 5, he was too breathless to sleep lying down. He dozed sitting up for 20 or 30 minutes at a time before air hunger woke him. Day 7, the concentrator failed. Raymond's oxygen saturation dropped to 62%. His lips turned blue. His nail beds were purple. His daughter called 911. The paramedics brought oxygen and got his saturation back up to 85%. They said he needed to go to the hospital. Raymond refused. He didn't want to die in a hospital. The paramedics left him with 1 small oxygen tank. It had maybe 6 hours of supply at 5 liters per minute. Day 8, the oxygen tank was empty. Raymond sat in his chair struggling to breathe. Each breath was work. His respiratory rate was 38 breaths per minute. Normal is 12 to 20. He was using every accessory muscle to try to pull air into his damaged lungs. His daughter sat next to him holding his hand. She asked if he wanted to go to the hospital. He shook his head. He couldn't speak anymore. Day 9, early morning. Raymond's breathing became more labored. His oxygen saturation was in the 50s. His heart was racing, trying to compensate. His daughter called her brother. By the time he arrived, Raymond was unresponsive. His eyes were open, but he didn't seem to see them. His breathing was gasping. At 6:27 in the morning, Raymond stopped breathing. The medical examiner listed the cause of death as acute hypoxemic respiratory failure due to chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and pulmonary fibrosis. This is not an isolated incident. Patients with COPD, pulmonary fibrosis, and other chronic lung diseases are being denied home oxygen or having their oxygen authorization discontinued. Insurance companies are applying criteria designed for initiating oxygen therapy to patients who have been oxygen dependent for years. They're denying refills and claiming oxygen is no longer medically necessary despite documented hypoxemia. They're requiring patients with end-stage lung disease to try pulmonary rehabilitation. They're too sick to complete. People are dying from lack of oxygen while their doctors fight with insurance companies. Home oxygen is not optional for patients with severe lung disease. It's life support. Denying oxygen to someone with documented hypoxemia is denying them the ability to breathe. Raymond's pulmonologist had 8 years of documentation showing progressive lung disease and oxygen dependence. There was no medical justification for discontinuing his oxygen, but the insurance company denied it anyway, and 9 days later he was dead. If your parent, your spouse, anyone you love uses home oxygen, check their authorization status. Know when it expires. Know what the renewal process is. If authorization is denied, appeal immediately. Get documentation from the pulmonologist. Get oxygen saturation measurements. Make it clear this is life-sustaining treatment. These stories need to be shared. Every patient denied oxygen. Every family who watched their loved ones slowly suffocate. Every documented case of hypoxemia ignored by insurance reviewers. This is preventable. Raymond should be alive. Right now, as you finish this video, another coal miner's lungs are failing, and Medicare Advantage just decided that breathing is no longer medically necessary. Subscribe, because tomorrow it could be your father suffocating in his own living room, fully conscious, for 9 days.